"My body is too small, cowboy. I can't bear children," said Apache woman. He held her anyway. The sun hung low over the quiet desert town, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Dust swirled gently across the dirt roads, and the distant mountains cast long shadows. That day there was no rest and oscillating of her absence. In the small town where everyone knew everyone, a young Apache woman walked slowly, her bare feet leaving light prints on the warm earth. She moved with grace, though there was a subtle heaviness in her steps, a quiet sorrow that she tried to hide beneath the calm expression on her face. She carried herself with dignity, but her eyes, dark and reflective, told a story of longing and loneliness. Her name was Nayeli. From a young age she had known she was different from the other girls in her village. While they dreamed of motherhood and raising children under the wide open sky, she faced a secret pain. Her body, delicate and small, would not allow her to bear children. The realization had come slowly, like the desert wind shaping the sand. Subtle at first, then undeniable. Nayeli had learned to live with this truth, but it left a quiet ache in her heart, one she rarely shared with anyone. She had grown used to hiding her sadness, carrying it silently as she worked with her hands and tended to her small garden, her family, and the few animals they kept. That afternoon, as she walked toward the town square, Nayeli noticed a figure on the horizon. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a worn hat pulled low over his eyes. Dust clung to his boots and coat, but there was a steady calm in the way he carried himself. He was a cowboy, traveling through the region, known by some in the town as a man of quiet kindness. His presence was unusual in their small, mostly Apache community, and yet there was a familiarity in the way he seemed at ease with the open land. Nayeli slowed her steps, curious but cautious. She had seen men like him before, men who came and went, leaving little more than footprints behind. But something about this one felt different. He was not loud or boastful, and there was a softness in the way he scanned the horizon, as if he were looking for something important yet unseen. The cowboy noticed Nayeli as well. He stopped a few feet away and tipped his hat slightly, a gesture of respect rather than formality. There was no rush in his movements, no pressure in his gaze. He simply stood there, watching her with quiet attentiveness. Nayeli felt an unexpected flutter in her chest, a mixture of curiosity, caution, and an almost imperceptible sense of relief. Here was a man who did not demand anything from her, who did not rush to fill the silence with words or assumptions. For a moment she let herself breathe, feeling the tension she had carried for so long begin to ease. They exchanged a few polite words. Nayeli learned his name was James. He had traveled far, moving from town to town, helping where he could and seeking work on ranches along the way. His voice was steady, neither harsh nor overly soft, but it carried a warmth that immediately put Nayeli at ease. He asked about her life, her work, and the small garden she tended with such care. He did not pry, but his questions showed genuine interest, an openness that made her feel seen. In return, she answered honestly, sharing small details about her day and the routines she followed to keep her family and land in order. As they walked together, their conversation flowed naturally. James spoke of the places he had seen, of wide rivers that glittered under the sun, of mountains that seemed to touch the clouds, and of quiet towns where he had found moments of peace. Nayeli listened with fascination, imagining the lands beyond the horizon, so different from her own home, yet somehow connected by the human experiences of hope, struggle, and resilience. She found herself laughing softly at his stories, surprised by the ease with which his presence made her feel lighter, as if some of the weight she carried had been lifted simply by sharing the air with someone who understood the value of patience and kindness. Despite the growing bond, Nayeli could not ignore the shadow that lingered in her heart. She sensed that James might one day see through the careful walls she had built around herself, that he might uncover the secret she had buried so deeply. Her fear was not rooted in shame, but in the vulnerability that came with opening herself to another person. She feared disappointment, rejection, and the fragile hope that she dared not fully embrace. And yet, as they continued to walk, she felt a small spark of courage. There was something in James's steady gaze, in the gentle way he moved and spoke, that suggested he might accept her, not for what she could or could not give, but for who she was. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over the town. James paused near a small stream that ran along the edge of the desert. Water trickled over smooth stones, and the air carried a hint of coolness that contrasted with the warmth of the day. He knelt and cupped the water in his hands, offering some to Nayeli. She hesitated, then accepted, feeling the refreshing coolness against her lips. In that simple act, a quiet connection was made, one that required no words. It was a moment of trust, of recognition, that despite the hardships of their lives, they could share something small and profound together. Nayeli glanced at James, seeing the soft lines of his face, the hint of a smile beneath his dusty hat. She felt a mixture of hope and fear, a gentle pull in her heart that told her she might not be as alone as she had believed. She wanted to tell him everything, the secret she had kept hidden for so long. But the words remained lodged in her throat. Instead, she simply allowed herself to be present in the moment, walking beside him, feeling the warmth of his presence like a shield against the cold loneliness that had followed her for years. As twilight approached, the town began to quiet. Shopkeepers closed their windows, and the occasional horse trotted by in the distance. James offered to accompany Nayeli to her home, and she accepted, grateful for the company yet nervous about the closeness it implied. On the way, they spoke of simple things, her favorite foods, the work she enjoyed, the songs her family sang. In these ordinary exchanges, a sense of familiarity grew, as if they were slowly weaving their lives together through shared moments and gentle understanding. When they reached Nayeli's modest home, she paused at the doorway, feeling the weight of the day's events. She looked at James and felt a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Here was a man who had not judged her, who had not pressured her, who had simply walked beside her and shared in the quiet beauty of the world. She wanted to tell him the truth about her body, about her inability to have children, but fear kept her silent. And yet, even in her silence, there was a subtle understanding that he might accept her, might see her worth beyond the challenges she faced. James tipped his hat once more, offering a gentle smile. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said simply, as if the world outside their small interaction did not matter. Nayeli nodded, feeling a small warmth in her chest that she had not felt in years. She watched him walk away, his figure growing smaller in the fading light, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself a quiet hope. Perhaps, she thought, the loneliness she had carried for so long could be eased, and perhaps she could find a connection that was based not on what she could give, but on who she truly was. That night, as she lay on her simple mat, the soft desert wind drifting through the open window, Nayeli reflected on the day. The memory of James's calm presence and kind eyes lingered, bringing with it a sense of possibility. She realized that while the road ahead might be uncertain, there was a chance for something new, something gentle and real. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream, not of what she had lost, but of what she might still gain. And in that quiet desert night, a small spark of hope was born, lighting the way for the days to come. The next morning, the desert sun rose slowly, casting a golden glow over the town. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of sage and dry earth. Nayeli stepped outside her home, her heart still carrying the quiet hope she had felt the previous evening. The memory of James's calm, kind eyes lingered like a gentle warmth. She wondered if he would come today, if he would continue to walk beside her without judgment, without expectations. She shook her head slightly, reminding herself not to get too carried away. Yet, despite her caution, a small part of her longed for his presence. It wasn't long before she saw him again, approaching from the edge of the town. His boots stirred up small clouds of dust, and his hat was tilted low as always, casting a shadow over his face. But she could see the faint curve of a smile as he spotted her. He walked toward her without hurry, his calm demeanor giving her a sense of comfort she had rarely felt before. When he reached her, he tipped his hat gently and said, "Good morning, Nayeli. Did you sleep well?" She nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "I did," she replied, her voice soft. "And you?" "Better, now that I see you." he said simply, his words carrying a warmth that made her chest tighten. She looked away quickly, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. She was not used to such attention, not in this gentle, understanding way. Most men she had met were loud, demanding, or indifferent. James was none of these things. He was steady, patient, and kind, and she felt a quiet pull toward him that she did not fully understand. That morning they walked together to the small stream outside town. The water sparkled in the sun, moving over the rocks with a soft, soothing sound. Nayeli knelt by the edge, dipping her hands into the cool water, and James did the same. They sat side by side in comfortable silence for a few moments, letting the water wash over their hands, feeling the simple joy of being present together. "I like coming here," James said after a while. "It feels like the world slows down a little." Nayeli nodded, still gazing at the water. "It is peaceful," she said quietly. "Sometimes I feel like the desert is the only place where I can hear myself think." James looked at her, noticing the shadow in her eyes that lingered despite the brightness of the morning. "Do you ever feel lonely?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes. Most days I manage. But sometimes the silence is heavy." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, as if speaking the truth aloud made it more fragile. James did not push her. He simply sat closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "It's okay to feel that way," he said. "You don't have to carry it all alone." For the first time in a long while, Nayeli felt a sense of relief. No one had ever said those words to her with such sincerity. She had grown used to hiding her feelings, keeping them locked inside where no one could see, where they could not be judged or misunderstood. But here was a man who seemed to understand that her sorrow was not a weakness, that it was part of her story, and that it could exist without diminishing her worth. Over the next few hours, they talked about small things: her daily routines, the animals she cared for, the plants she tended in her garden. James shared stories of the towns he had visited, the ranches where he had worked, and the quiet moments he had found in the wide open spaces of the West. He spoke without boasting, without demanding attention, simply sharing his experiences with a gentle warmth. Nayeli listened, captivated by his words, and found herself laughing softly at his stories, at the way he described a runaway calf or a stubborn horse. She realized that she had not laughed like this in a long time, and the feeling surprised her. As the day passed, Nayeli began to feel a deeper sense of trust forming between them. She found herself opening up in small ways, sharing details about her life that she had never mentioned to anyone outside her family. She told him about her childhood, the lessons she had learned from her elders, and the challenges of living in a place where resources were scarce and life was often difficult. She spoke of her hopes and dreams, her fears and doubts, and James listened without interruption, without judgment. It was during one of these moments that she mentioned quietly and hesitantly something she had never shared with anyone else. I cannot have children," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My body is too small." "I have always known this, but it is a part of me I have tried to hide." She looked down at the water, feeling her heart pound in her chest, afraid of what his reaction might be. James did not speak immediately. He simply reached out and placed his hand gently over hers. The touch was warm and steady, and it conveyed something words could not. He did not recoil, nor did he show disappointment. Instead, he simply squeezed her hand lightly, letting her know that he understood. "Nayeli," he said softly, "that does not change how I see you. You are still you. You are still amazing, still strong, still worthy of love." Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not feel shame. She felt relief, a weight lifting from her chest that she had carried for years. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. No one had ever made her feel that her worth was not tied to her ability to have children, that she could be loved fully just for being herself. They sat by the stream for a long time after that, talking in gentle whispers, sharing stories, and simply being present with one another. The connection between them deepened not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through quiet understanding, patience, and empathy. Nayeli realized that she could trust James, that she could allow herself to feel something she had long suppressed. hope. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, they began to walk back toward town. The streets were quiet, with only a few townspeople going about their day. James walked beside Nayeli, his presence a steady comfort. She felt a small courage building inside her, a willingness to let someone in, even if it was scary. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that she still had fears and insecurities to face, but for the first time she felt that she did not have to face them alone. During the walk, they passed a small market where children played and merchants called out their goods. Nayeli watched the scene, noticing the simple joys of everyday life. She thought about her own family, the people she cared for, and the life she had built despite the challenges she faced. And she thought about James, the man who had entered her life so quietly, yet so profoundly. She realized that love and connection could take many forms, and that sometimes the most powerful bonds were built not on grand gestures, but on understanding, patience, and the willingness to see someone fully. By the time they reached Nayeli's home again, the day was warm and bright. She felt a mixture of gratitude and nervousness. She wanted to thank James for his kindness, for his understanding, but words felt inadequate. Instead, she simply looked at him and smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that carried more meaning than any speech could. James tipped his hat once more, a gentle gesture that spoke of respect and care. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said, as if the world outside their small interaction did not matter. Nayeli nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest that she had not known in years. She watched him walk away, the dust rising softly under his boots, and felt a quiet hope take root in her heart. That evening, Nayeli reflected on the day. She thought about the stream, the gentle conversations, and the moment she had shared her secret. She realized that opening herself to someone had been terrifying, but also freeing. She had allowed herself to be vulnerable, and in return she had received understanding, kindness, and acceptance. For the first time in a long while, she felt that her life could include something more than solitude, that it could include trust, companionship, and the quiet beauty of shared moments. As night fell over the desert, the sky filled with stars that seemed to stretch endlessly across the horizon. Nayeli lay on her mat, feeling the cool breeze drift through the open window. She thought about James, about the way he had listened to her, cared for her, and made her feel seen. She realized that she was beginning to feel something she had long denied herself, the possibility of love, unconditional and patient, built not on what she could give, but on who she was. And in that quiet night, surrounded by the vastness of the desert and the gentle whisper of the wind, Nayeli felt the first real spark of hope, a spark that promised new beginnings, new connections, and a life where she could be fully herself, embraced and valued, without fear or shame. The days that followed brought a quiet rhythm to Nayeli's life. Each morning, she rose with the sun, tending to her garden and caring for the few animals her family kept. Yet, no matter how routine her days were, her thoughts often drifted to James. She found herself wondering what he was doing, whether he thought of her as much as she thought of him. There was a warmth in her heart when she remembered their walks, the gentle conversations by the stream, and the way he had listened to her without judgment. But alongside that warmth was a shadow, an unease she could not shake. She knew her secret. The truth she had shared with him could change everything. Her inability to have children had been a silent companion her entire life, and it carried with it a mixture of sadness and fear. She feared that James might one day see her differently, that he might regret growing close to her, or worse, that he might not truly understand what it meant to love someone who could not fulfill a dream so many considered natural. She tried to push these thoughts aside, but they lingered, like shadows stretching across the sand in the fading light. James, meanwhile, had not stopped thinking about her. He admired her strength, her resilience, and the quiet way she carried herself. He saw the pain she tried to hide, the moments when her eyes would drift toward the horizon, and he understood that her sorrow was not a burden to him but a part of who she was. He did not judge, did not push, and did not offer empty promises. Instead, he simply showed up, day after day, sharing moments of ordinary life and listening to her with patience and care. Yet he sensed the walls she had built around her heart, There were times when she seemed distant, her laughter faint, her eyes guarded. He respected her need for space but longed for the moment when she would allow him fully into her life. One afternoon, as the sun beat down on the town and the air shimmered with heat, James found Nayeli sitting alone under the shade of a mesquite tree. She had a small basket in her lap, filled with herbs and flowers she had gathered. She looked thoughtful, distant, as if lost in memories only she could see. James approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. "Hello, Nayeli," he said softly, tipping his hat. "Mind if I sit?" She looked up surprised and then nodded. "Of course," she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Please." He sat beside her, leaving a respectful space between them. They watched the town move around them, the children playing in the dirt, merchants calling out their goods, and the occasional traveler passing through. The scene was ordinary, yet the quiet presence of each other made it feel extraordinary. For a while, neither spoke. Nayeli picked at a leaf in her basket, and James watched her, admiring the way she seemed to notice the smallest details in the world. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and hesitant. "James, do you ever think about what it means to be alone?" James considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he said, "but I don't see it as the end of life. Sometimes being alone teaches you strength, patience, and the value of connection when it finally comes." Nayeli nodded, but her hands trembled slightly. "I've lived much of my life alone," she admitted. "Even with my family, even with friends, there is a part of me that feels incomplete. It's not something I can fix, and it's not something anyone else can fix for me." James reached out again, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Nayeli, none of that makes you any less. You are whole, even if you feel broken sometimes. What we share, what we could share, isn't about filling gaps. It's about walking together, understanding each other, and being there when it matters." Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not speak. She simply looked at him, feeling the honesty in his words and the sincerity in his touch. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she did not have to hide her fears, where someone could see her fully and still choose to stay. It was a thought that frightened her and thrilled her at the same time. In the days that followed, Nayeli found herself more aware of her emotions than ever before. She noticed the way her heart raced when she saw James, the way her thoughts lingered on him long after he had left, and the small moments of longing that crept into her daily routines. She also noticed her hesitation, an instinct to retreat when her fears became too heavy, when the thought of fully trusting someone became overwhelming. She recognized that these feelings were natural, that love often brought both hope and fear, and that navigating them would require courage she had not fully summoned before. James, for his part, was patient. He understood that trust could not be forced and that emotional walls took time to dismantle. He continued to show up, sharing stories of the lands he had traveled, helping with chores, and offering small gestures of kindness: a repaired fence, a freshly fetched bucket of water, a shared meal. Each act, though ordinary, carried a quiet message. "I am here. I care. I will not leave." One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned shades of gold and pink, James invited Nayeli to join him for a walk beyond the town. She hesitated at first, uncertainty flickering in her mind, but something in his calm gaze encouraged her to say yes. They walked together through the desert, the sand warm beneath their feet, and the wind carrying a soft scent of sage and wildflowers. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding that they were each carrying their own fears, yet choosing to share the moment together. At a small rise overlooking the town, they stopped. The view was breathtaking, the mountains in the distance glowing in the fading light, the town below bathed in a soft amber hue. Nayeli felt a swell of emotions: fear, hope, longing, and gratitude, all mingling in her chest. She turned to James, unsure if she was ready to speak the words she had kept inside for so long. "James, sometimes I feel like I am too broken for anyone to truly care," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly. "I worry that my inability to have children will make you regret being close to me." James took her hands gently in his own, holding them as if anchoring her to the present. "Nayeli," he said softly, "you are not broken. None of that changes what I feel. I care about you for who you are, not for what you can or cannot give. Love is not measured by what we produce or achieve. It is measured by understanding, compassion, and the choice to stand together." Her breath caught in her throat. She had heard words like these before, but never with such conviction, never with such undeniable truth. She realized in that moment that her fear, while natural, was slowly losing its power over her. She could imagine a life where she was fully seen and fully accepted, and that thought brought both tears and a tentative sense of joy. Yet the path forward was not without struggle. Nayeli found herself retreating at times, pulling back when her insecurities flared, when memories of past pain surfaced, or when the weight of her own doubts became too heavy. Each time James met her with patience, never pressuring, never demanding. He allowed her the space to process her feelings while remaining a steady presence she could rely on. In those moments of withdrawal, she began to understand the depth of his care, not a care based on convenience or desire, but on a genuine respect for her humanity. One afternoon, as they worked together repairing a small fence near her home, Nayeli felt the familiar tug of fear creeping back. She stepped back, her hands shaking slightly, unsure of how to proceed. James noticed immediately and stopped, turning to her with a soft, reassuring smile. "Take your time," he said gently. "There's no rush. We do this together, at your pace." She nodded, grateful for his understanding. They worked side by side in silence, each gesture a quiet testament to their growing trust and connection. It was in these ordinary moments, fixing a fence, sharing a meal, walking through the desert, that their bond deepened, not through dramatic confessions, but through the patient accumulation of care, respect, and empathy. As the sun set and the sky turned a deep, dusky purple, Nayeli realized something profound. Her fears and insecurities would not disappear overnight, but she was learning to face them with someone by her side. She understood that love was not about perfection or fulfillment of expectations. It was about acceptance, patience, and the willingness to walk together, even when the path was uncertain. That night, as she lay on her mat, she thought about the day and the quiet lessons it had brought. She thought about James's steady presence, his unwavering patience, and the gentle way he had allowed her to reveal her vulnerabilities without fear of judgment. She realized that she was beginning to feel a sense of security she had never known, a belief that perhaps she could allow herself to be fully seen, and that someone could truly care for her, flaws and all. And in the stillness of the desert night, Nayeli felt a quiet hope take root, a fragile but growing certainty that love, patience, and understanding could overcome fear, doubt, and the shadows of past pain. She knew that the journey ahead would not be simple, that emotional barriers would rise and fall, but for the first time in her life, she felt ready to face them, not alone, but with someone who had chosen, day after day, to stand beside her. The days passed slowly but beautifully in the small desert town. Each morning, Nayeli woke to the soft light spilling through the wooden shutters of her modest home. The wind carried the scent of sage and dry earth, and the faint sound of a nearby stream made the early hours feel peaceful and alive. She had begun to notice that life no longer felt as heavy, that even the simple tasks she carried out each day seemed a little lighter. James's presence had brought a subtle warmth into her life, one that neither rushed nor demanded, but simply existed, a calm, steady light in a world that often felt harsh and unforgiving. James had become a constant in her life, arriving almost every day without fail. Sometimes they walked to the stream to watch the water ripple over smooth stones, and sometimes they worked together in her small garden, planting seeds and tending to the herbs and flowers she loved. They shared meals, laughter, and stories, each moment weaving them closer together. Nayeli realized that her heart, which had long been cautious and guarded, was slowly opening. She allowed herself small joys. The brush of his hand when passing her a basket, the quiet glance that carried meaning without words, and the laughter that came easily in their shared stories. It was one afternoon, as the sun hung high and the desert air shimmered with heat, that Nayeli felt the depth of her emotions more clearly than ever. She and James were repairing a section of the fence that had been damaged by wind and animals. They worked side by side, passing tools, sharing quiet words of encouragement, and occasionally stealing glances at one another. There was a rhythm to the work, a sense of shared purpose that brought them closer. Nayeli found herself watching him as he worked, noticing the lines of concentration on his face, the strength in his hands, and the gentle way he treated even the smallest task with care. When they paused for a short rest, Nayeli took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin, and the steady presence of James beside her. She turned to him, her voice quiet, but steady. "James, I think I am beginning to understand something important," she said. He looked at her, curious and attentive. "What is it?" he asked softly. "I am beginning to see that love, real love, is not about what you can give or what you cannot," she said, her eyes reflecting the sunlight. "It is about understanding, patience, and choosing to be with someone despite their fears, their flaws, and their past. And I see that in you." James smiled, a gentle warmth spreading across his face. "Nayeli, that is exactly what I feel. Love is not about expectations or conditions. It is about being present, being patient, and caring deeply for someone just as they are." Her heart swelled with a mix of relief, joy, and quiet astonishment. She had never imagined feeling this way before. Her past had been filled with doubts, insecurities, and the weight of her own limitations. Yet here was a man who had seen her fully, embraced her vulnerabilities, and never once made her feel less than whole. In that moment, Nayeli felt a sense of acceptance so profound that tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. As the afternoon stretched on, they continued their work, but the air between them had changed. There was a new sense of closeness, an unspoken understanding that they were no longer just companions or friends. They were partners in the truest sense. Nayeli felt the courage to let her guard down further, to share more of herself without fear of rejection. She spoke of her childhood dreams, her favorite memories, and even the quiet moments of sadness she had long carried alone. James listened with unwavering attention, responding with gentle words and small gestures that made her feel seen and valued. That evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned shades of pink and gold, James invited Nayeli to sit with him by the edge of the stream. They watched the water flow over the rocks, the sound soothing and constant, like the heartbeat of the desert itself. Nayeli rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body and the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was a simple act, but one that carried immense meaning, a trust, a comfort, and an acknowledgement of the bond they had nurtured over days and weeks. "I never thought I could feel this way," Nayeli whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I never thought I could let someone in so fully, or that someone would accept me as I am." James brushed a strand of hair from her face and looked into her eyes with quiet intensity. "Nayeli, you are more than enough. You have always been enough. And now, I am honored that you let me be part of your life." The words settled over her like a gentle blanket, warming her heart and easing the shadows that had long lingered there. She realized that the fear she had carried, of being unloved, of being incomplete, was no longer a chain. With James, she could be herself entirely, without pretense or hesitation. She could laugh, cry, dream, and hope without fearing judgment. And in that realization, a sense of peace bloomed within her. Delicate, yet strong. Over the next few days, their bond continued to grow. They shared quiet mornings watching the sunrise, afternoons tending to small tasks, and evenings under the vast star-filled sky. They spoke of their dreams, their fears, and the small joys that made life meaningful. Nayeli noticed how her heart no longer ached with loneliness. Instead, it pulsed with a gentle, steady warmth whenever James was near. She realized that love was not always dramatic or loud. It could be quiet, patient, and persistent, growing in the spaces between ordinary moments. One afternoon, as they walked through the desert together, James stopped and picked up a small, smooth stone from the ground. He handed it to Nayeli, who turned it over in her hand, feeling its weight and smoothness. "It's nothing special," he said softly. "But I want you to have it as a reminder. Life is full of small moments like this. Simple, ordinary, but meaningful. And I hope it reminds you that you are cherished." Naeli looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears she could no longer hold back. "Thank you, James," she whispered, "for everything. For your patience, your kindness, and for seeing me." James smiled, gently placing his hand over hers. "I don't need thanks. Being with you, sharing life with you, that is enough for me." The moment was quiet, yet it spoke volumes. Naeli felt the depth of their connection, the sincerity of their love, and the certainty that she had found someone who valued her completely, not for what she could give, but for who she was. It was a love that transcended fears, limitations, and societal expectations. A love rooted in understanding, acceptance, and shared humanity. That evening they sat together under the stars, the desert vast and silent around them. Naeli rested her head against James's shoulder once more, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. She thought about her past, the fears, the doubts, the loneliness, and realized that each experience had brought her to this moment. She had learned patience, resilience, and self-awareness. And now she could embrace the love that had found its way into her life, gentle but unshakable. James, for his part, felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had walked a long journey to reach this point, through deserts, towns, and moments of solitude. But the reward was clear, a bond built on trust, understanding, and unconditional care. He understood that love was not about grand gestures or fleeting passion, but about consistency, presence, and the willingness to stand beside someone through both joy and fear. And in Naeli he had found a partner who shared that understanding, a soul as resilient and beautiful as the desert itself. Days turned into weeks, and their relationship deepened further. They learned the rhythms of each other's lives, the way Naeli liked her tea in the morning, the way James hummed quietly when he worked, the small gestures that spoke of care and affection. They faced moments of doubt and hesitation, as all humans do, but they faced them together, drawing strength from the trust and love they had cultivated. One evening, as they watched the sun dip behind the distant mountains, Naeli took a deep breath and looked at James. I think I am ready," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Ready to trust fully, to let myself love and be loved without fear." James took her hands gently in his own, his eyes soft but filled with certainty. "I have been ready all along, Naeli, and I will be here, always with you." In that moment, they shared a quiet embrace, a tender acknowledgement of the journey they had taken together. It was not a loud or dramatic declaration, but a moment of profound intimacy, a testament to the patience, trust, and love that had grown between them. Naeli felt a sense of completeness she had never known, not because her life was perfect, but because it was shared with someone who truly understood her, accepted her, and chose to stay. As night fell over the desert, they remained together under the vast sky, the stars sparkling like distant lanterns. Naeli felt a calm certainty settle over her heart. She knew that challenges would come, as they always did, but she also knew that with James by her side, she could face them with courage, grace, and love. And in that quiet, shared moment, she realized that she had found something rare and precious, a love that was steady, patient, and unconditional. The desert mornings had a special kind of quiet now, one that felt alive with possibility. The sun rose slowly over the mountains, casting soft gold and pink across the town, and the air carried the scent of sage and warm earth. Naeli had begun to notice that the world itself seemed kinder, more vibrant, since James had become part of her life. She no longer walked alone with a heavy heart, and even ordinary tasks, watering the garden, tending to the animals, mending fences, felt lighter when shared with someone who cared deeply. James had become more than a companion. He had become part of her world. He was there for the small things, like fetching water or helping with chores, and for the quiet, intimate moments, like watching the sun dip behind the mountains, or sharing a laugh at a playful calf that had wandered into the garden. Naeli had come to trust him fully, allowing herself to be seen, not just in pieces, but completely, with all her strengths, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities. One morning as they worked together in the garden, Naeli paused and looked at James. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. James smiled, brushing a hand over the soil and wiping it on his worn trousers. "I do," he replied. "Not just tomorrow, but years from now. I think about what we can build together, the life we can share, and the moments we will create." Naeli felt a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that for the first time she could imagine a future without fear or hesitation, a future where she was not defined by limitations or past sorrows, but by the love, trust, and connection she shared with James. She thought about the small joys they had already built together, the laughter, the quiet walks, the gentle conversations, and she knew that these moments would grow into a life filled with meaning and happiness. Over the next few weeks, they began to take small steps toward creating a home together. They repaired the old fences around her property, planted additional herbs and flowers in the garden, and even built a small wooden bench near the stream where they could sit and watch the water flow. Each task, though simple, carried a sense of purpose and shared accomplishment. They discovered that building a life together was not about grand gestures or dramatic changes, but about consistent care, attention, and respect. One afternoon, as they rested beneath the shade of a large mesquite tree, Naeli turned to James, her eyes reflecting the sunlight. "I never imagined I could feel this way," she said softly. "I never imagined that someone could love me fully, without conditions, without expectations. And yet, here you are." James reached out and took her hand gently in his own. "Naeli, you have always been worthy of love. You have always been enough. I am just grateful that I get to be here with you, to share life with you, and to stand by your side." Her heart swelled with emotion. She realized that this love was different from anything she had ever known. It was patient, steady, and unconditional. It was not about fulfilling roles or meeting expectations. It was about choosing each other every day, through ordinary moments and challenges alike. She felt a deep gratitude for the journey they had taken together, the trust they had built, the fears they had faced, and the love that had blossomed quietly but powerfully between them. As the days turned into weeks and then months, Naeli and James continued to grow closer. They celebrated small victories together, like a bountiful harvest in the garden or a repaired fence that had long needed attention. They shared quiet evenings under the stars, talking about dreams, hopes, and the possibilities of life beyond the town. Naeli began to notice how her laughter had returned fully, how her heart felt light and open, and how she could face each day with courage and optimism. The town itself began to notice the bond between them. Neighbors smiled when they saw James walking with Naeli, offering small gestures of kindness or acknowledgement. Some were curious about their relationship, while others quietly admired the way they supported and cared for each other. Naeli felt a sense of pride and contentment, knowing that she had found someone who truly understood her, accepted her, and loved her wholly. One evening, as the sky turned shades of deep purple and gold, James led Naeli to the small wooden bench by the stream. The water flowed gently over the rocks, reflecting the colors of the sunset. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone, similar to the one he had given her months earlier. But this one was different. It had been carefully polished, with her initials, and is carved delicately into the surface. "Naeli," he said softly, holding out the stone, "this is for you. A reminder that life is made of small, meaningful moments, and that I will always be here with you in all of them." Naeli took the stone, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingers and the care in James's gesture. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of gratitude and joy. "James, thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for your patience, your kindness, and your love." He smiled, taking her hands in his once more. "You don't need to thank me. Being with you is the greatest gift I could ever receive. You have shown me the meaning of patience, trust, and unconditional care. I am lucky to share life with you." In that moment, Naeli felt a profound sense of peace. She realized that her past fears, her worries about being incomplete or unworthy, no longer held power over her. She had found someone who loved her fully, not for what she could give, but for who she was. She had learned that love could be steady, patient, and transformative, and she understood that this bond would carry them through whatever challenges life might bring. As the night fell, they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast desert sky. The air was cool, carrying the soft scent of sage and the distant hum of nocturnal life. Nayeli rested her head against James' shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat and the quiet certainty of their connection. She knew that life would continue to present obstacles, but she also knew that with James by her side, she could face them with courage, grace, and love. Over time, they began to build a life that reflected both of their dreams and values. Their home became a place of warmth and laughter, filled with the scent of herbs and flowers from Nayeli's garden. They shared responsibilities, joys, and quiet moments of reflection. Each day was ordinary in some ways, yet extraordinary because they faced it together, supporting, caring for, and cherishing one another. Nayeli noticed how her heart had transformed. Where there had once been fear and loneliness, there was now love, hope, and confidence. She had learned to trust fully, to allow herself to be vulnerable, and to embrace the present with gratitude. James had become her anchor, her companion, and her equal partner, someone who celebrated her strengths and accepted her weaknesses. One bright morning, as the sun rose over the desert, Nayeli and James walked together to the edge of the small stream. They watched the water flow, reflecting the sunlight like a river of gold. Nayeli picked up a small flower that had bloomed along the bank and handed it to James. "For you," she said softly, smiling. James took it, tucking it gently behind his hat. "Thank you," he said, "but it feels more like a gift from the earth, a reminder that beauty exists in the simplest moments and in the people we choose to share life with." Nayeli nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle in her heart. She realized that happiness was not about grand achievements or dramatic events. It was about presence, connection, and the quiet assurance that someone truly cared for you. And she knew without a doubt that she had found that in James. As the day went on, they continued their work in the garden, tended the animals, and shared stories about the past, the present, and the dreams they held for the future. Every action, every word, every glance strengthened the bond they had built. Nayeli understood that this was the life she had always hoped for, not one defined by societal expectations or by fears of inadequacy, but one defined by love, trust, and shared purpose. When the sun finally set, casting the desert in shades of deep orange and purple, Nayeli and James sat together under the stars. The vast sky stretched endlessly above them, a reminder of the limitless possibilities that life held. Nayeli rested her head on James's shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body and the certainty of his presence. She thought about the journey they had taken, the fears she had faced, the trusts they had built, and the love that had blossomed quietly but powerfully between them. And in that quiet moment, Nayeli felt a deep, abiding sense of peace. She had found love, acceptance, and partnership in a world that often felt harsh and unpredictable. She had learned that being vulnerable was not weakness, and that trust and patience could transform fear into hope. With James by her side, she felt ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that they would do so together, with understanding, care, and unwavering love. The desert stretched endlessly before them, filled with promise and possibility. And for Nayeli and James, the journey was only beginning. A life shared, a love nurtured, and a bond that would carry them through all the days to come.